Okay, well, today we are going to take some notes on rates and writing and solving proportions. This is going to be an extension of what we just did on the last set of notes. We're going to go to page 54 of our interactive notebook. And on page 54, you're going to find a paper that has the W, K, and the U on it. And we are going to attach that to our book. Once again, this is on page 54. Like so. The topic for these notes is rates, followed by writing and solving proportions. I'm going to come up a little closer. Okay. Our essential question for these notes, what you should be able to answer by the time we are done with these notes, is how do I set up a proportion to solve a real world problem? So continuing with what we did yesterday, this is the same process of doing that cross product in order to see if a proportion is accurate, but we're actually going to use that process to find a missing term. And we're going to do that when we're solving real world problems. And this is found in the standard 6, ratio and proportion 3. And just to state it again, by the end of this lesson, you should be able to solve a real-world problem using ratios and rates. We're going to talk about what a rate is. Now, the first thing I want to do is I want to give you an example of a problem where we might see the need to set up a proportion. And this problem example would be, please write this down in your notes. If I can drive 20 miles in 2 hours, how many miles can I drive in 1? If I can drive 20 miles, in 2 hours, how many can I drive in 1? Now, granted, I understand this is a pretty simple problem, and you probably can do it in your head. But I think it's a good way for us to be able to see the process of setting up a proportion so that we can do it with more complicated problems that maybe aren't as easy to do it mentally. So now we're going to scooch down and we're going to go to where we see the W, the K, and the U. And these are going to be little acronyms to help us to remember the 3 steps to setting up a proportion. And the first thing for the W is, this is where we would write the word ratio. W stands for word. And basically what that is up above in this word problem, we have the makings of a ratio. Actually, we have the makings of a proportion, but a proportion is made up of 2 ratios. And so we need to know how to write the ratio in words. And so this looks like we have 1 unit over another unit. And for example, up above in ours, we can see if I drive 20 miles, so we have miles over hours in 2 hours. So our ratio and our proportion are going to be set up like this, where we have this miles and hours. The next thing that we are going to do is the K, and the K is where we put the known ratios. The ratios that we know. And this is where we put in basically the information that is given to us in the word problem. We just kind of fill in the blanks of what we already know. So we're going to write and identify the known ratio. And so for our example that we had something miles over something hours. Well, if I go up above to my problem, I see that I have 20 miles and 2 hours. That's why another reason why it's useful to mark our text when we're critically reading our word problems. So I'm going to fill in the blanks. So I've got 20 miles. Let me use this color pen. 20 miles, and I have 2 hours. Okay, so now that we've done that, the thing that we're left with is our unknown ratio. And our unknown ratio is where we are going to write what we need to know. Or find out. And the example here would be, we want to know how many miles. So we don't know the miles, but we do know that we have 1 hour. And I know that because it's saying how many miles can we drive in 1 hour. So now the next question is going to be, using that, we're going to set these two proportions up, the one that we created here and the one that we created here, and it looks like this. Okay, so now that we figured that out, we need to go through the process of solving. To solve, you are going to multiply diagonally, just like we did yesterday. And then, once you do that, so that looks like this. If we have 20 miles over 2 hours, I'm going to abbreviate hours, equals an unknown miles over 1 hour, then what I would do is I would multiply these two that I know diagonally. So I would do 20 times 1. And 20 times 1 we know equals 20. So now that I've solved that, then the next thing I'm going to do is divide by what's left. And what's left here? Well, after we multiplied these, sorry about that. Once we multiply these, then what's left is this 2 hours. So we're going to take and divide our answer here by this. We're going to divide it by that. So we're going to end up with our answer, which is 20 divided by what's left, which is 2. And we're going to get 20 divided by 2, which is 10. So our answer would be 10 miles. we can travel 10 miles. Okay, so now that we've done this and we've gone through this whole process, let's go back to our notes, and we're going to go now to page 53. And we're going to put in the practice portion, which looks like this. My 4 pieces of tape. And this is once again on page 53. Now, we've got a word problem. So we're going to first, whoopsie, sorry about that. Okay, so first we're going to go through and we're going to mark up our text. So it says, Kendall studies 5 hours over 3 days. If he continues to study at this rate, how long will he study in 1 week? Now, just to clarify, a rate is when we are comparing 2 units. So if you see in this problem, we're comparing Kendall's hours to the amount of days. So he studied 5 hours over 3 days. Now, we want to know then, if he continues to study at this rate, how long will he have studied in 1 week? Okay, so the first thing, now that we've marked up our word problem, we're going to identify. And basically what we are doing here is we are identifying what is our question. And our question is, how long will Kendall study in 1 week? And for the sake of our conversation, we need to remember that a week is 7 days. You know that. Okay, so we're going to start off with our W, what we know. Well, I know the hours and the days. We're comparing how many hours he studies to how many days. Okay, so that's what we know. Then we've got that's what we need to know, or our word ratio. Sorry about that. Then our known is when we actually plug in the numbers. And so we know, if we're considering hours to days, we have 5 hours to 3 days. All right. So that's the first part of our proportion. And the last one is the unknown. What don't we know? Well, if we're looking at hours to days, up above it says how long will we study in 1 week? So we know it is a certain amount of days, which is 1 week, which is, like we said, 7 days. So we know it's in 7 days, but what we don't know is this. How many hours? So I could put a question mark in there, but instead I'm going to do something a little bit more academic, and I'm going to actually put in a variable. We talked about this. This is why, remember, we don't use the X for the multiplication symbol. We use the dot because when we have variables, they oftentimes are represented by the letter X. So I'm going to put X in as our variable. Okay, so now we're going to keep moving down. So we've got all of our information written out. So the next thing we're going to do is we are going to write the question. What is our question that we're trying to answer here? And it's simply put, how many hours will he study in 7 days? That's what the variable represents. Okay, so now we're going to solve. First thing we do is we set up our proportion. We have our known ratio equaling out our unknown ratio, which has the one value we know, but also our variable. Okay? And following our steps that we just talked about, we are going to start off by multiplying. We're going to multiply at this diagonal. So we're going to do 5 times 7. And look at that. I did the multiplication symbol with the X. Next time I'll do the dot. Okay, so 5 times 7 is 35. And then we take what we don't know, which is this 3, and we're going to divide by it. So I'm going to do 35 divided by 3. 3 goes into 3 one time. 3 goes into 5, drop the 5 down, one time. I'm left over with 2, and for the sake of space, I'm just going to say that that is 2 over 3, or 2/3 left. So I end up with x, which is the hours, equals 11 and 2/3. So he will have studied 11 and 2/3 hours. So I hope that helps you. We will be practicing this quite a bit in the next few days, but I hope that gives you kind of an opening introduction to proportions and how to set up these type of problems. If you have any questions or if you missed some of the notes, feel free to go back and re-watch this set of notes. Thanks a lot. Bye.